Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're going to be doing part 48 and our final episode for our 1.7 update before we move on to the European pack. And it seems like the modding scene to celebrate the new European pack coming, really awesomely we got a whole bunch of new European animals, and pretty much everything except the first animal going through here is all part of a sort of a European pack the mod has been making. So there's been a really awesome little thing. It's got some of my favorite animals as well, and I'm really excited to talk about them. But first, we're going to be not in Europe. We're going to be on the other side of the world. We've got an animal from Oceania that got a remake. I'm really happy to show this off because it's really just one of my favorite animals. We have got the South Island giant moa here, and we can see this wonderful big female here. Rig edited and changed to better reflect the colors that we know from... or that we believe to know from oral traditions of moa. So that's really wonderful. So, yeah. This is the South Island Giant Moa, or Dionys robustus, made by Genora Pizza, who originally did it a while ago, but decided to remake it and really did a wonderful job recreating this species in Planet Zoo. Yeah. So, this guy was a member of the moa family. They are an extinct group of... birds that lived in New Zealand. There was up to 9 species until humans came about 1,000 years ago, and or 700 years ago technically, and drove them to extinction sadly, as they were a favourite food for the local Māori. And still really wonderful. They are ratites. That means they are a group or paleognaths. They related to animals like tinamus. Their closest living relative is the tinamu rather than the kiwi. And funny enough, the kiwi's closest living relative is actually the elephant bird. And they also have they're the only tetrapod that completely lost their front limbs but kept their back limbs. So it's very interesting. And since they've been on that island or the islands of New Zealand for millions of years, they lost pretty much all ability to fly and became the large herbivores. To compete with, since they didn't have to compete with large mammals, they became the large herbivores of that ecosystem. So these guys were the biggest of all the moas. The close contender was the North Island giant moa. These guys got about 2 meters tall, or 6'6" at the back here, so about as tall as a really tall person, about 2 meters tall. And they could reach foliage by reaching their head up to about 11 feet 10 inches, or 3.6 meters, which making it one of the tallest, if not the tallest birds to ever live, which is really cool. And it's also known from completely pretty well specimens that have been preserved both in middens, but also in caves that are littered around New Zealand that really do a good job of preserving not only their bones, but also preserves some of their feathers and also DNA. So we know a lot about the DNA of moas, and that could lead to de-extinction potentially, but that's still really cool. From what we know about their ecology is that they lived in the South Island of New Zealand as well as Recuer, or also known as the Stewart Island, and they were very generalist in terms of their habitat. They lived in dunes, scrublands, forests, and grasslands, especially alpine areas as well. And as I mentioned, they were driven to extinction by humans, by the Māori about 600, 700 years ago. And what's really interesting about their ecology as well, and the oral traditions, is that the color, the reddish color that you see here, is actually based on an oral translation where they kind of called the giant moa the Kamuni. I believe that's how it's pronounced. I'm not sure the pronunciation, but it basically means big red. So it's a big red bird, pretty much. And you can see the female is so much larger than the male. Let's see if we can get them to run closer to each other and show off the size comparison. And I really like how she did the babies. Genora did the babies really well. They're based off tinamus, which, as I mentioned, are their closest living relatives. So they did a wonderful job there. But you can see the incredible size of the male and the female compared there. Since it's actually really cool if they're part of their ecology, because most ratites, the females are larger, and they're the one that mainly competes for the attention of the male. And in moa, it's believed to be because they had such fragile eggs for their size. The males were so small because they sat on the eggs and incubated them, while the females were took the role of the males and competed for males to take care of their babies. And its evidence suggests that from weight estimates is that an adult female moa was nearly 3 times the size as an adult male moa in terms of weight, because an adult female moa can get to about like 200, 250 kilograms, and these guys are probably about a third of that, so like potentially 100 kilograms would be pretty big. Still really, really wonderful though. I'm really happy Janora did moa, and it looks really, really nice. She did a wonderful job. And yeah, so that's our New Zealand animal done for at the moment. We're going to be moving on to another remake. I'm sure we've covered this guy like 4 or 5 times. But this next one was done by Leaf Loafhound, and this little remaster given a little touch-up by Gaboy. So we're going to talk about the Red Fox again. I'll keep it brief because we've already talked about this guy a few times. But we also got cute puppies. We'll talk about the male over here. So the red fox, or Vulpes vulpes, is one of the largest of the true foxes, and is one of the most widely dispersed species of foxes. Also one of the most widely dispersed carnivorans in the world. And they pretty much live across the entire... They live from Portugal to Canada and everywhere in between. They have a very, very extended range. It's also been introduced into Australia, and that is, and they also generally live in parts of North Africa. So that's why they're generally considered least concerned by the IUCN. And they're also considered, because of their arrival into Australia and the damage that they have done to local species in Australia, like bilbies and all sorts of local marsupials and reptiles and things, they are considered one of the top 100 worst invasive species on the planet. And there are actually plans to eradicate them from Australia by 2050. So hopefully that goes all to plan, because while as much as we love native Australian species as well, but these guys originally came from smaller sized ancestors during the Wisconsin glaciation. The Redfarian period during the Middle Pleistocene, and colonized America during the Wisconsin glaciation about a few thousand years ago. And although they are among the true foxes, these guys represent a more progressive lead to carnivory. So these guys are mostly carnivores compared to other foxes. They eat a lot of meat, small animals, but they will also occasionally eat things like berries and things. Really, really interesting. Though apart from its large size, you can tell a red fox apart from other foxes because of their red coat, and they're actually very, very adaptable. So they can actually find them a lot in all sorts of different environments. So that helps them become so widespread. And despite their name, they often create... we'll have a look at the cute little babies as we talk about them. It seems that they often create leucistic and melon individuals, and there's been like 45 species that have been recognized, but largely, most likely, there's mainly just the Eurasian, maybe a potential the subspecies. It's just a lot of the subspecies have been looked at, and a lot of them are just splits by regional population, things like that. And red foxes are usually found in pairs or small groups consisting of families, such as a mated pair and their young, like these guys, very, very cute. And the young of the mated pair will remain with their parents, and also just taking care of the next babies. And as I mentioned, the species is mostly carnivorous. They will feed on small rodents, but they'll also eat rabbits, squirrels, game birds, reptiles, vertebrates, and young ungulates, and will occasionally eat fruit and vegetable material. And although they tend to be kill smaller predators, including other fox species, they're quite vulnerable to other animals such as wolves, coyotes, golden jackals, large predatory birds such as golden eagles, and Eurasian ingle owls, and along with large-sized felines and medium-sized felines. That's part of very likely to be protected by them. And they have a very, very long history associated with humans. Also been extensively hunted as a pest and a fur bearer for many, many centuries. And interesting enough, they're actually one of the most important animals for that trade. And considering they've been doing so well, even that hunting didn't really that drastically impact their populations. And they have benefited a lot from human impacts because they are able to colonize urban areas because they're not too dangerous and they can just scavenge on what people left behind. They're really, really adaptable, as we mentioned. Quite big too. I believe the weights that they get to... let's check. To look through all the subspecies. So typically get about 35 to 50 centimeters high at the shoulder and 45 to 90 centimeters long, at 18.35 inches in body length, and with tails measuring 30 to 55 centimeters or 11 to 21 inches long. and they generally, in terms of their weight, the largest red fox ever recorded was about 17.2 kilos, but I believe on average they probably get about 10 kilos. Very, very interesting animals. How can you not love a good fox? And Gaboy, you did a wonderful job remastering this. And Lowfound, look at these little cuties. Really, really nice model, and it's really cool to get to see this updated for the Europe pack, because these are all European animals now. It's like we get our own modders European pack. I think that's really, really awesome. So next we're going to move on to this next one. Was the next three actually were done by Leif and Nicholas Lionrider, probably one of the most prolific, both of them prolific modders in Planet Zoo. We've got the Eurasian Otter. So these guys, also known as the Old World Otter or the Common Otter, they're semi-aquatic marsupial native to, as you guessed, Eurasia. And they can be found on waterways of the coasts of Europe, many parts of Asia, and parts of Northern Africa. And they eat a diet of mainly of fish and are strongly territorial, and are endangered in some parts of their range, but they are recovering in others, so that's very, very good. And they're very typical of their species. They have like a brown top and a creamy throat, and very long and slender, as adapted to living in aquatic habitats. And the otter differs by the North American river otter. They have a shorter neck, broader visage, and a greater space between the ears and its longer tail as well. Though the Eurasian otter is the only otter in much of its range, it's really confused for another animal, so you're not very likely to spot a North American otter in Europe and vice versa. And they can get pretty big. They can get between 57 and 95 centimeters, or 22.5 to 37.5 inches long, not counting the tail of 35 to 45 centimeters, or 14 to 17 inches. And females in general are shorter than the males. And let's see, is this the baby here? We've got a little baby juvenile. We'll have a little talk about them later, talk about how cute they are. So we'll have a look at this one swimming. And they average in body weight between 7 and 12 kilograms, although occasionally a large male will get up to 17 kilograms. And a record-sized specimen, which has been recorded, but most definitely not verified, is about over 24 kilograms. So in terms of their distribution, as we mentioned, they're very, very widely distributed. They're the most widely distributed otter species. They live in parts of Asia and Africa, as well as Europe, south of Palestine. And they can be now common in parts of Latvia, also coast of Norway, throughout regions and across Great Britain as well. And in India, they can also be found in the Himalayan footlands and central Indian landscapes, and even parts in Southeast Asia and Sumatra. So they have a very, very, very wide range. It's very interesting. And they inhabit unpolluted areas of fresh water, such as lakes, streams, rivers, canals, and ponds, where there's enough food supply. And even in some places, they will live in isolated golf courses and things. So that's really, really, really cool, as long as they get enough food. So their diet consists mainly of fish, which is the most preferred diet, especially in more tropical habitats, and in cold environments, and generally like winter and things. Oh, I want to have a look at that one swimming. Look at you having fun time. Generally, they will eat like amphibians, crustaceans, insects, birds, and sometimes small mammals. That even includes young European beavers. So it seems they can be quite voracious predators if they need to. And as you can see by their teeth. So they're also very strongly territorial. They live alone for the most part, and an individual territory can vary from 1 to 40 kilometers long, and with 18 kilometers being usual. And the length and size of the territory depends on the food availability of the local area. And they often use their feces and other things to mark their territory. And they're often held by members of the same sex, so males and females' territories will overlap. And mating takes place in the water, with Eurasian otters being non-seasonal breeders, as they mean they will breed all throughout the year. They can simply just be, simply as soon as she's ready, they will breed pretty much. Gestation is about, well, female otters become sexually mature at about 18 to 24 months old, and the average age of their first breeding is 2.5 years old. These guys swimming along. We'll have a look at the cute babies while we're talking about them. Where's the baby? There's an adult, hungry, adult. Let's see if we can find the baby. Here's the baby, I think. Here we are. So look at these little babies. So gestation for these guys is about 60 to 64 days, with the litter actually accounting for 10% of the female's body mass. So that's pretty interesting. And after this gestation period, about 60 to 64 days, the babies will be born and will be dependent on their mother for about 13 months. And the males will play no direct role in parental care, although the territory of a female and her pups is usually entirely within that of the male. So if there's an issue, he'll probably come to help. And hunting takes place for them mostly at night, while the day is usually spent in the den, or the holt, where they're usually in a burrow or hollow tree that sometimes can only be entered through underwater. And though they usually hunt through sight and touch only, there's evidence emerging that they may be able to smell underwater. So that's pretty interesting. So very similar to like star-nosed moles. So that's very, very interesting. Really, really cool little animals. I mentioned they're considered least concern just because they have a stupidly wide distribution. Decline, though, are across most of their range, though, because of like pollution such as pesticides, also habitat loss and hunting. But they're now recovering in most parts of Europe, so they're a very good conservation success story. They are listed endangered in places such as Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, and critically endangered in Mongolia. And in South Korea, they are listed as a national monument and first-class extinct endangered species. But luckily, in most of the areas, they are doing quite well. And the decline of populations in fish in Iberia, which has been a preferred food for otters, along with the expansion of exotic fish, could potentially put Eurasian otters in that area to extinction. But overall, they're doing quite well, though locally they are having some declines, so that's why they are considered near threatened. But generally, they're doing okay. They have such a wide range, and they're recovering in a lot of areas, so that seems like they aren't doing too badly. But yeah, really, really wonderful. So that was done by Leif and Nicholas Lionrider, and the next one was also done by Leif and Nicholas Lionrider. We have got the Eurasian Beaver. So a really, really cool guy here. I think these guys are having a bit of a issue. They're glitching out. Move them. Want to have a look at them swimming around and having a good time. So the Eurasian Beaver, or Castor fiber, is the Eurasian beaver is a species of beaver that's found across all of Eurasia, well, pretty wide space in Eurasia, and they were actually, sadly, like the American beaver, they were pretty much hunted to near extinction because of their fur and castrum, which is an oil that they produce. And by the turn of the 20th century, only about 1,200 beavers survived, and 8 relic populations across Europe and Asia. But luckily, due to really, really awesome conservation work, they've been introduced to much of their former range. So they now live in Spain, Central Europe, Great Britain, and Scandinavia, also a few regions of China and Mongolia, and are listed as least concerned by the IUCN, and are recovered well in most of Europe, and is extirpated from Portugal, Moldova, and Turkey. But luckily, they're doing really, really well to be considered least concerned. So that's really, really awesome. So they are very, very plastic colorations. They kind of depends between reasons. So like the lighter chestnut ones can be found in like Belarus, and the darker ones can be found in more Russia areas. And they're actually one of the largest. They are one of the largest living rodent species that are native to Eurasia, and are actually larger than the American beaver. They have a head to body length of about 80 to 100 centimeters, with a 31 to 39 inches, with a 25 to 50 centimeter long tail, or 9 to 19 total inches long, and they live between 100 and they weigh about 100 to 30 kilograms, or 24 to 66 pounds, and in Norway, adult whales will average about 21 and 0.5 kilograms, and females average 23 kilograms. And adults from the same country average about 18 kilograms. By average weight, no. They seem to be the world's second smallest rodent after the capybara, and are actually slightly larger and heavier than the North American beaver. And the one largest specimen was recorded about 31 kilograms, or 70 pounds, and it's believed that they could have potentially got even larger, with the specimen getting potentially up to 40 kilograms and over. So the main differences they have, even though they look superficially, they have different chromosomes. The North American beaver has 40 chromosomes, while the Eurasian one has 48, so they're not genetically compatible. And it seems that they can't interbreed, so that's definitely good evidence that they're their own species. Also, they have longer guard hairs and different, slightly coloured pelts than American beavers. So typically they kind of have 20% have reddish brown, nearly 8% are brown, and only 4% have blackish coats. While in North American beavers, 50% have pale brown coats, 25 are reddish, 20 are brown, and 6 are blackish. They tend to be more uniform in color. And they also have a larger, less rounded head and longer nasals than a North American beaver, and they have shorter shins than the North American beaver. So they're not as capable as walking on back legs as American beavers. Really, really wonderful animals, wouldn't you agree? So similar to, in terms of their ecology, they're a keystone species. So their dams will often create habitats for animals such as European voles, Eurasian otters as well, and Eurasian water shrews. And they will often kind of very similar to North American beavers. They will create refuges for fish, help trap carbon, also like reduce erosion, things like that. Very, very common. Also, they seem to affect the bats. So Vespa bats tend to increase in areas where beavers live, since they pretty much create gaps in the forest for them to fly around. And we'll have a talk about reproduction while we find our cute little baby one. Look how wonderfully cute this little baby beaver is. So Eurasian beavers have about 1 litter per year, and they come to estrus for only 12 to 24 hours during late December and May. They peak in January. Unlike most rodents, beaver pairs are monogamous, and they'll stay together for multiple breeding seasons. The gestation for these cute little babies is average 107 days, and they average about 3 kits per litter with a range of 2 to 6 kits. And most beavers do not reproduce until they're about 3 years old, but about 20% of 2-year-old females reproduce. So generally you wait until they're about 3 years old to want them to have babies. And just like North American beavers, they are pretty herbivorous. So they eat water and river plants, tubers, including softwood barks as well. They have long appendixes, which hold microorganisms that allow them to digest cellulose. And their daily food intake can be pretty big. They eat about 20% of their body weight every day. And talking about how they were nearly hunted to extinction, they were hunted for their fur, and they're called castrum, which is a secretion from their scent glands that was believed to have medicinal properties. And it's believed that they were pretty much extinct. As we mentioned, their population in some areas may have been as low as 300 animals. But the population estimated as of 2003 consists of 369,000 individuals. So a very, very good recovery from that. And they are, as I mentioned, considered least concern. And have been introduced to areas such as Great Britain, even quite recently, as of like 2018 and places like that. So generally across Britain, they have been introduced in those areas, and there's been really good conservation work to bring them back, especially with you're having some issues as well. You're having issues as well. Really, really wonderful animals, I think. We're having issues with them. But yeah, these guys are really doing well, so that's really awesome. And being introduced into all sorts of areas. So I believe that's enough talking about the Eurasian beaver. So next one's our last one done by all the lion riders and leafs of the world. So this last one is more of a subspecies than a full species like the Eurasian beaver and otter. We have got here the European elk, or simply the European moose. So this is the species name is Elsus. So this is the dominant subspecies, and these guys are found all across Europe. The dominant subspecies. They can be found in. Let me grab. Damn it. They're pretty much found all across Europe, like Belarus, pretty much everywhere. They're called elk, even though they're not related to the Waipati or the American elk. They can be found in all sorts of places in Europe. So, like, in fact, they used to live in Germany, but now they mainly live in the most northern areas. So, places like Norway, Finland, places like that. Really, really interesting animals, I think, if I do say so myself. Just trying to find... There we are. There's the subspecies. So the population, I believe, in Europe and Asia... Finland, the population is about 115,000. And they're lowest in Asia or Europe is Czech Republic. They have a population of about 50. But these guys are doing very, very well in the northern parts. They're believed to live in certain parts of Germany as well, historically, or prehistorically. They're no longer really present in Central or Western Europe, except for Poland, Lithuania, and Belarus, since they've been since the 1970s. With also some recent sightings in Eastern Germany, along with because their range used to extend past Germany as well, including France, Switzerland, and the Benelux nations. The population's increasing and regaining territory, so they are doing quite well. That's why moose in general are considered least concern. And they're kind of a mid-sized subspecies I've described. They're not as huge as some of the Alaskan moose, but they are still quite large animals. I believe that the weight that they've got is about, males will generally weigh between 320 and 475 kilograms, or 705 to 1,047 kilograms, pounds, I mean. And females generally weigh 275 to 375, or 606 to 827 pounds. So they're still quite large. And the shoulder height ranges from about 1.7 to 2.1 meters, or 5'7" to 6'11", so about 6 foot tall. And look at these cute little babies, aren't they adorable? I like the little changes. I think they make them look much more like Eurasian moose, since they're very, very interesting. So yeah, they're not too different in ecology from, of course, your normal moose. They're mainly just a population that's being found in Europe. Being moose, they do like to live in colder areas, so you're not going to find them in places like Italy, but you will find them in the northern areas, as I mentioned. Feed on all sorts of different things, branches, aquatic stuff as well. They did a really good job. How can you not love this wonderful moose? Having a good time. So yeah, that was done by Leif and Nicholas the Weinwriter. So if you want an alternate to your Alaskan moose and you want to put it in your European zoos, this is the perfect choice. And next, we've got this next one was done by Leif and Mega Gaming Rex. There has been an issue with the size, as you can tell. The Central European wild boar is clearly not as big as a bison, but seems like that'll be fixed once the fix it for the update. So this is the super huge version. Yeah, really, really cool boar. So these are the wild boar. Specifically, the subspecies is the Central European boar, or Sus scofa scofa. So that's the subspecies division. That's the dominant subspecies. They are also called the wild swine, or the wild pig, or the common wild pig. They're native to much of Eurasia and North Africa, but have been introduced to the Americas and Oceania. The species is one of the most wide-ranging mammals on Earth, and also one of the most widespread pigs. Due to their high numbers, they've been considered, and high distribution and wide range of stuff, they're considered least concerned by the IUCN. And they've been invasive species in part of the introduced range, such as New Zealand and the Americas. Of course, Australia as well. And they're originally believed to have originated from Southeast Asia during the early Pleistocene, and outcompeted other suid species throughout the Old World. So as of 1990, about 16 subspecies have been described, but based on 4 regional groupings. But more recent evidence suggests that the wild boar, or Sus scofa, may actually be a species complex, and there could be potentially up to like 6 to 8, I believe 6 species, or 6 to 8 species of boar within that species complex. Very, very interesting. They also live in matriarchal societies, consisting of interrelated females and their young, which is both male and female. And fully grown males are usually solitary during the breeding season. The main predators for these guys is the grey wolf, except for the Far East and the Lesser Sunda Islands, where their main predator actually becomes the Siberian tiger and the Komodo dragon, which is very interesting. So in the Sunda Islands, they're mostly preyed upon by Komodo dragons, and in the Far East by Siberian tigers. The wild boar has also had a really long association with humans, because they've been a big game animal, and also the ancestor of our domestic pigs. And it seems like a lot of them have been rehybridizing with domestic pigs, and create these hybrids that have been a serious pest around Australia and the Americas. So as I mentioned, there is a lot of different evidence to consider the different subspecies, or even potential evidence for different species. They can get quite large as well. I believe Yeah, they can get about 40. What's it? I'm looking for the sizes. Adult sizes is mainly determined by lots of outdoor factors or physical factors. But in most of Europe, which is the subspecies here, they can get between 75 and 100 kilograms, 165 to 220 pounds, or 70 to 80 centimeters, or 30 to 31 inches in shoulder height, and 150 centimeters, or 59 inches in body length. While females average a little bit smaller, so 60 to 80 kilograms, or 130 to 180 pounds in weight, 70 centimeters, 28 inches in shoulder height, 140 centimeters, or 55 inches in body length. So that's kind of where these guys, they can get quite large. You guys have heard of hogzillas, that they get huge, but that's kind of your general big boars. They also have a wide variety of calls that they use to talk to each other, and they're very, very omnivorous, so they pretty much feed on anything. They feed on eggs, plants, tubers. They're particularly good at digging, so that's why they can be very bad for the environment when they're overpopulated or introduced in places where they shouldn't be. They often upturn the environment and cause a lot of erosion, so that's very, very not good. As I mentioned, they live in female-dominated societies where the females don't have their babies and the males go off and do their own thing. And the breeding period for these guys mostly lasts from November to January. And the males will kind of get angry and kind of smash each other and fight each other for mates, and then they get the spoils and get to have babies. So the gestation period generally for first time breeding sows is usually between 114 to 130 days, and while for older sows it can be 113 to 140 days. And farrowing occurs during March and May, and where the litter size depends on the age and the nutrition of the mother. And the average litter can be 4 to 6 piglets, but they can maximize up to 10 to 12. And they're whelped in a nest constructed by twigs and grasses and leaves. And should the mother die prematurely, the piglets are adopted by other sows, so they're generally quite well cared for. Although they, once they get big enough to run around, they usually get able to piglets begin to feed and display those behaviors about 2 to 3 weeks, and then their permanent dentition comes fully in about 1 to 2 years old. And with the exception of the canines, their teeth stop growing about the middle of the 4th year, and in canines the old males will continue to grow throughout their lives as they curve. And sows will obtain sexual maturity at about a year old, while males about 2 years later. However, estrus usually occurs after 2 years in sows, with males performing in ruts about 4 to 5 years once they get bigger. The maximum lifespan is 10 to 14 years. Those few specimens do survive past 4 or 5, and once in captivity have lived for up to 20 years. So yeah, very, very interesting animal, and very huge habitat, found pretty much all across Europe and Eurasia. Very, very huge range, as I mentioned, and have been introduced parts like Australia, New Guinea, America, and South America. So yeah, very, very wonderful animals. Goes well with most things. Just hopefully the sizes get fixed before the next with the next update, because they are aware of the size change, the huge sizes, so they're going to change that. That's not a worry. So that was done by Leaf and Megarex Gaming. Our second to last animal is by a newcomer on the scene who just imported a new model into the game. It's Kaidu, how you pronounce that? I believe that's correct. But it looks like we've got the Scigirl antelope, so that's really, really awesome. So I've already covered this guy like way back in the beginning, but now it's finally back as its own new species. So we'll have a look at the Scigirl. Really, really funky looking animals. These guys are a critically endangered antelope species that lived over most of the Eurasian steppe, from the foothills of the Carpathian Mountains to the Caucasus and into Mongolia. And during the Pleistocene, they also lived in Beringia, North America, and the British Isles. So these guys had a very, very huge range. These guys get about 61 to 81 centimeters, or 24 to 32 inches at the shoulder, and weigh between 26 and 69 kilograms, or 57 to 152 pounds. The head to body length is typically between 100 to 140 centimeters, or 39 to 55 inches. And the really, really prominent feature of the Scigirl, you can see they have these really, really big nostrils, as well as their dark markings on their nostrils here. It's almost like a big trunk almost. It's a really, really funny looking. Looks like a Dr. Seuss animal. But this allows them to filter out dust that's kicked up by the herds, and it also helps cool the animal's blood, and it also helps frigid air before it heats up the frigid air before it's taken to the lungs, so it allows them to breathe better and not get cold. So it's pretty cool. The coat also changes seasonally, so in summer their coats will appear yellow to red towards their flanks, though in some subspecies that does change. And there's also 2 distinct molts during the year. There's one in spring and one in autumn. And only the males, you can see, possess these horns. They can get with about 12 to 20 rings there, with a base diameter of 25 to 35 millimeters, or 1 to 1 5/16 inches. The horns of a Russian Saiga measure a little bit bigger than that, are about 28 to 38 centimeters, 11 to 15 inches, and Mongolian ones slightly smaller, about 22 inches, 22 centimeters, or 8 or 11/16 of an inch. Look at these wonderful females. You can see the difference here. The females don't have these large horns like the males. Really wonderful things. So these guys live in very large herds. They're found in semi-deserts, steppes and grasslands, potentially open woodlands as well, where they eat all sorts of different plants, including some that are actually poisonous to other animals. They can also cover large distances by swimming across rivers, but avoid steep and rugged areas. They generally breed in the start of November, where stags will fight for the the acceptance of the females. And the winner leads a herd of about 5 to 10 females, occasionally up to 50 if he's a real stud. And in springtime, the mothers will come together to give birth en masse. And 2/3 of the births are twins, and a remaining third of the births are single calves. And Saiga, like the Mongolian antelope, are known for their extensive migrations across the steppes as they try to escape natural calamities. They're also highly vulnerable to wolves, and juveniles can be taken by foxes, steppe eagles, golden eagles, dogs, and ravens. So, they used to be very common during the last glacial period. As I mentioned, they used to live across the Canada and Yukon and Alaska, and they also lived in the British Isles. But since the Ice Age, they've kind of been fragmenting down lower and lower. Also, during the 14th and 15th centuries, they were kind of brought down more and more, even though it remained high in most areas. There was a rapid decline where they were nearly completely exterminated in the 1920s, but they were able to recover quite well. And in 1950, 2 million of them were found in the steppes of the USSR, and their population fell drastically during the collapse of the USSR because of uncontrolled hunting and the demand of their horns for Chinese medicines. And they also kind of used it as an alternative to rhinoceros horn, so that would have been much harder to get. And Saigas were pretty common then. But today their populations have just plummeted even more, as much as 95% in the past 15 years, so they've really lost a lot of them. They're considered critically endangered by the IUCN, although their population is estimated to be still in the thousands, or hundreds, tens of thousands. It's just their population decline has been so severe that it's very worrying. And it's kind of estimated that about 50,000 live today. Luckily, they've been trying to create all sorts of different ways to try and conserve them. There's been estimated some growth increases in some areas, but there was, very sadly, more than 120,000 Saiga were confirmed dead in northern Kazakhstan, which represented a third of the global population at the time because of diseases. Though a survey in 2021, April, suggests that the Saiga population has risen from an estimated 334,000 to 842,000. So luckily they are growing, but and it's believed this population increase, luckily, was partly attributed to government crackdown on poaching and the establishment of conservation areas. So that shows what a good impact governments getting behind these conservation efforts can do. But most of these threats, as I mentioned, there's been really big issues with diseases, also poaching, both for their food and for Chinese medicines as a substitute for rhinoceros. And they also have one of the fastest population collapses in large mammals recently observed, so that's very sad. But luckily, there have been some good efforts to try and protect them. There have also been talks about reintroducing them to Pleistocene Park in northern Siberia, and potentially even in other areas, so they can create like isolated populations that are free from a lot of diseases. But they have a precarious future, but it shows they have a very great ability to recover. And look at these cuties. How can you let this little cutie go extinct? I think he's way too adorable. I can love this little man. I love the saga. Saga is just such a weird animals. They're Dr. Seuss animals, and I'm trying to get the name. Kaidu, I believe it's Kaidu. She did a really wonderful job with these saga. Wonderful. I can't wait to see what they do in the future. It'll be really awesome. Definitely download this one. Definitely fits with the Europe pack, the mod Europe pack. So that's really awesome. And so yeah, next we're going to be moving on to our last animal. We've got the this is by Leaf and Narwhal. This is the largest animal in Europe, the largest land mammal. We have got the European bison, and this is our male here. Look at our wonderful big male. Really awesome. So the wisent, also known as the European bison or the European wood bison, is one of the two extant species of bison, along with the American bison. They're the heaviest wild land animal in Europe, and individuals in the past are believed to be even larger. And they have a very interesting conservation story. During the late antiquity and the Middle Ages, they became extinct through much of Europe and Asia, and they survived into the 20th century only in like North Central Europe and the Northern Caucasus. And during the early years of the 20th century, they were believed to be hunted to extinction pretty much. So now they've pretty much gone from extinct to the wild to near threatened, because there was a small population, I believe about 14, that were bred back, and now there's several thousand living in a bunch of different conservation areas across Europe and Asia. So they're doing quite well, at least, though they are remnant populations, sadly, but they are still doing quite well. These guys have very few predators, and there have been scattered reports of them being hunted by wolves, lions, tigers, and bears. And also they were commonly killed for their hides, and they used their horns for drinking, so they were pretty much just for cups. So that's pretty sad. But yeah, they've been mentioned, like ancient Greeks mentioned them living around in Italy. Very widespread animals, but now they only live in a certain amount of areas. Pretty large too. Modern animals are about 2.8 to 3.3 meters in length, so they're very large, or about 9.2 to 0.8 feet, not counting the tail. They get between 1.8 and 2.1 meters, or 5.9 to 6.9 feet in height, and their general weight for males is about 615 to 920 kilograms, or 1,356 or 2,000 to 28 pounds for males, and females a little bit smaller, about 2.4 to 2.9 meters long, or 7.5 to 9.5 feet in body length. That their tails, 1.69 to 1.97, 5'5" to 6'5" in height, and approximately 400 kilograms, 424 kilograms and 633 kilograms, so between 935 and 1,396 pounds in females. And at birth, their calves are quite small. They weigh between 15 and 35 kilograms, or 33 to 77 pounds. And yeah, really interesting. And on average, they are a little lighter than European bison, but they are much taller. It's believed because they have these taller proportions, they've got shorter hindquarters, longer tail and longer horns, also longer legs, because they are more of a woodland species rather than an open plain species like the American bison. So they have adaptations to better move around the forest. And yeah, as I mentioned, their history, very interesting history. In terms of the behavior, they are a herd animal. They live in both mixed and solitary male groups. Mixed groups consist of adult females and their calves, young aged to 3 and young adult bulls, while males will kind of live by themselves or in herds. Bison's social structure has been called by specialists as a matriarchal society, so similar to like elephants and things like that. And territories can be held by bulls, with young bulls aged between 5 and 6 form large home ranges than older males, so the older males will have smaller territories. And they do not defend their territories, so their range often greatly overlaps. And cows' areas are usually situated near meadows and water sources. And in terms of their diet, they predominantly feed on grasses like your typical bison, but they tend to be much more browsers compared to American bison. They'll eat a lot more shoots and leaves, and they'll average eat about 32 kilograms of food per day. And they're actually surprisingly agile as well. They can jump over 2-meter high fences, for example. And in terms of the rutting season, they occurs through August through October. Bulls at about 4 to 6 years. Although they're sexually mature, they are protected from mating by older bulls. So usually, even though they're reproductively mature, the older bulls keep them from breeding until they're big enough and ugly enough to compete. The cows usually have a gestation period of 264 days, so a little under a year, and typically give birth to one calf at a time. On average, male calves weigh between 27.6 kilograms at birth, and females are 24.4 or 53.8 pounds, and body size in males generally increases proportionally by the age of 6 years, with the female the higher increase in body mass in their first year, with their growth rates being comparably slower than the males. They're also quite long-lived. They have lived up to as long as 30 years in captivity, though their wild lifespans are estimated to be shorter. The lifespan of a Zubar in the wild is believed to be about 18 to 24 years, though females live longer than males. And their productive breeding years are between 4 and 20, and only between 6 and 12 for males. So males have a little shorter breeding window. And yeah. There's been really awesome conservation work because, as I mentioned, they were pretty much considered extinct in the wild. The founding population for the modern bison populations, I believe, is about 14. So during the 1950s, they were introduced into the wild. So places such as Poland, Russia, Lithuania, Ukraine, Germany, a lot of places like that. And turns out today the largest wild population lives between Poland and Belarus. And there's a population of about 1,000, and it's obviously growing. And there actually is plans to reintroduce them back into the UK, which will be the first time they would live in the UK's for about 6,000 years. And they're being set up with enclosure, so they'll be set free in 2022 within the 2,500-acre conservation area in Blean Woods near Canterbury. And the populations between these different countries vary. The lowest population is Austria, with about 10 animals. And the largest population, I believe, is Poland, which is about 2,000. So they're doing quite well. The population, I believe, is in about 10,000 or so. Really doing well. So it's a really great conservation story. So how an animal can become extinct in the wild and now become near threatened. So that's like one of the highest jumps you could probably get from conservation statuses. And they're nowhere near the threat of extinction they used to be, and they're only going from strength to strength, being reintroduced to lots of areas they used to do, and it's a really, really, really great conservation story to just show if people put in the effort, something they can go from 14 animals to a few thousand and continue on to be becoming more and more populous is just really, really awesome. So we're going to end off on that really, really uplifting note. And I think this will be a great time to end the episode. So, yeah, a little bit shorter one today. But really European themed, and I think it was awesome to talk about all these wonderful European animals. But yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified when I upload anything. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.